How's it going, friends? Welcome to Blaine, Minnesota. Welcome to the best video on the internet about Blaine, Minnesota. Today we are diving in, not into here. We're diving into the details and just showing you what it's like here in Blaine. So let's get going. All right, so right now I'm at the Lexington Athletic Complex, which is a beautiful, public athletic park, baseball diamonds, playgrounds, football field, including proper field goals and just some really nice infrastructure here to support this, great parking lot sizes, as well as great sort of concession stand and restrooms and things like that. It's a very, very nice public park, and sort of the infrastructure and the grounds are about as nice as it gets. And Blaine is a suburb in the North Metro and basically due north of Minneapolis proper, but also almost equal distance north of some of St. Paul as well. Blaine is in Anoka County, and it's a mixture of kind of older part suburb, much newer part suburb, and even some bordering on rural, basically on the very, very edge of the metro. Blaine is actually a very large landmass, so the amount of other municipalities that border Blaine it's really quite a few. Coon Rapids, Andover, Ham Lake, Fridley, Lino Lakes, Circle Pines, and actually the list does continue to go on from there. Depending on where you're coming from in Blaine, again, it's pretty large. So on the very northernest tip, it's going to be a little bit longer than this, but probably commute times average about 20 to 25 minutes to downtown Minneapolis, and maybe 25 to 30 minutes or so to downtown St. Paul. And I think because it's just almost exactly perfectly north of both cities, drive time to the airport is going to be a little bit longer, 30 minutes plus easily, but maybe more like 35-ish minutes more reliably. Generally speaking, I think Blaine is probably the furthest south in Minnesota where you start to get an up north feel. And some of that maybe has to do with the landscape and the trees and things like that more likely to find a pine tree or something here. But I actually think a lot more of it is kind of about the vibe, right? And sometimes that can be a little bit hard to put your finger on, what exactly is an up north vibe. And yeah, I don't know that I would dare define it, but sort of the signs of those things. I think when it comes to showings, you're more likely to see kind of a wood paneled or almost like a log cabin look in the basement of a house in Blaine versus if you were on the southern part of the metro. Not to say that never happens, but you're just more likely to find it here. I think that upnorth log cabin aesthetic of a house is just more prominent the further north you get. And again, I kind of think that Blaine is about where that starts. Another element of a home that I think feels a little bit more up north than not is you're more likely to find an outbuilding, a second garage, or something like that. And in that outbuilding or second garage or something, I think you're more likely to find an actual mechanic's shop, or also just storage for boats. Boats are very ubiquitous with up north, but also snowmobiles, dirt bikes, four-wheelers, and stuff like that. Kind of outdoor recreational items. And if you head further north to say Brainerd, which by the way, if you're looking to move to the likes of Brainerd, we have really great connections with people there, so feel free to reach out to us for that. We don't personally serve Brainerd because it's far away and there are people up there who specialize in it, but reach out to us and we'd be happy to connect you with somebody. But up there, the outbuilding, the pole barn, the toy shed is just so common, and it's less common in the metro, even less common in the city proper. I mean, it almost doesn't exist in the city proper. But again, Blaine is kind of the furthest south where you start to see that pop up a little bit more. The primary school district that serves Blaine is the Anoka-Hennepin Public School District, which according to niche.com ranks pretty dang well. The district as a whole gets an A- according to niche.com. And for elementary schools, you have Madison Elementary School, that gets an A. You have McKinley Elementary, that gets an A, and Rum River Elementary gets an A-. For middle schools, you have Northdale Middle School, that gets an A-, Roosevelt Middle School, that gets an A-. For high schools, you have Blaine High School and Centennial, both getting an A-, and Blaine high school has a large enrollment of around 3,100 students. It has a very broad offering of, arts and STEM, strong academic reputation, and Centennial High School serves Blaine as well as many others of these smaller cities kind of adjacent to Blaine. Overall has a very good reputation, good ranking on niche.com, and also has a kind of a reputation for advanced coursework options as well. Because of Blaine's size and how long Blaine has been around, the housing stock here varies dramatically across the board. On the more affordable end, you might be able to end up in Blaine in a single family home in the low 300,000s, but it's likely going to be an older home, probably 1950s maybe, or 1950s to 1970s. And the median sale price is $385,000, which is lower than the median of the metro overall. But without a doubt, we're going to start to see that kind of creep up as more and more new builds are being built in Blaine. And now there are already some homes that are pushing that $1 million mark, even by quite a bit. You could definitely spend $1.5 million or so in Blaine. The majority of those homes that already exist are going to be within that Lakes neighborhood or the Lakes neighborhood. It's kind of just weird to say that in a sentence. But then you're also seeing more and more new builds that are, maybe to be built, or maybe they're in spec and they're beginning to be built, that are pushing up to that $1 million mark. And those are primarily on the edges of where any of the development is happening right now, which is primarily in the northeast and eastern part of Blaine. That is typically kind of where that path of progress is existing within Blaine. And so most of the new builds in general are on the eastern edge and the northeast edge, obviously with some exceptions. I do think there's a very good value proposition, though, in buying a new build in Blaine. And of course, you can easily spend $1 million on a new build in Blaine, especially if you want to, spec out a home and go kind of custom or semi-custom. But a lot more of the spec build homes that are a little bit more in like the master plan communities, you're probably going to see around $500,000 to $700,000 range. Obviously, $700,000 being a bit more house with probably a bit more high-end finishes, but $500K in the low 500s for a single-family home. There's not that many of those places that exist in the Twin Cities, so that is why Blaine makes our list for best places to buy a new build in the Twin Cities. But okay, let's keep moving and we'll talk through the pros and cons of Blaine as I see them. Just a quick interruption to the rest of the video. For anybody who's new here, my name is Jesse Lynch. I run the hardest working real estate team in the game. We're called To the Twin Cities, and you can check out our website, tothetwincities.com. But this YouTube channel is here for you, by us, as a resource along your move or relocation to the Twin Cities. And I think if you continue to go down the rabbit hole, you'll see that it's just an immense catalog of virtual tours and other information, all with the singular focus of being helpful to folks like yourself. So if that sounds interesting, give the channel a subscribe. We're constantly putting up new videos of both neighborhood tours, home tours, and again, just kind of broader ideas, broader concepts that are helpful along the relocation. And also would love a like on this channel and a comment at all, whether it's about a place that you're interested in seeing, a place that you visited and you particularly loved, where you think you're going to end up if you end up moving here, etc. And one last little plug. I know this is getting long. I apologize, but we have a podcast channel called Welcome to the Twin Cities, where we interview people who we've helped relocate here. And it's not just to be like, hey, did we do a good job? Yes. It's more like, what is your opinion of places? Like, how did the process work for you? Even the process outside of what we helped with, so that people can ultimately have an idea of like what they can expect. And maybe even more so, more specifically, how is the Twin Cities different from where you're coming from? We're constantly trying to grow that catalog as well. So let's get back to Blaine. All right, y'all, right now we're in the preserve of Blaine, and every home site behind me is more of a custom home site by Jonathan Homes. Almost all of these have really lovely kind of backyard areas with a bit more natural elements sort of between your house and the house behind you. Behind the camera here too, there's more home sites dedicated to Jonathan Homes. And almost all of these lots here, almost all the ones that are for Jonathan Homes, are walkout basements or walkout lots where, like it implies, the basement just walks out into the backyard rather than a lookout, which is what there's a few lookout lots, but that's where, you can't exit the home through a door in the basement. You can only, you would have to exit through like a window or something like that. You could egress for safety, but you're not like going in and out a window every day to get in and out of your backyard. And these homes by Jonathan Homes, again, this is a bit more on the custom side of things. Probably start around the 800s, and you could probably spend up to $1 million pretty easily here as well. And in that sort of $800 to $1 million mark for one of these homes, you're getting a lot of house. 6-bedroom, 5-bathroom, 4,500 square feet, up, 3-car garage, maybe even a 4-car. And I think you'll see that in a lot of the new builds in Blaine in general, size is a real thing. You're getting a good amount of square footage for your money in Blaine. And I think overall, very good quality of life. But I want to talk through the pros and cons in general in Blaine. Pro number one, schools rank quite well. You're not in the top 10 or anything like that in the state, but in general, the niche ratings are quite high, and on a national level, they really rank quite well. Also, really good rankings for athletics and academics as well. One thing that is nice about Blaine is that it's sort of centrally located on the north part of the metro. So if you have a reason to commute to either downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul, you have almost equal distance, equal access to either one of those in Blaine. Blaine is a big piece of land, so it's kind of spread out, but in general, you're never more than like 15 minutes from a Target or a Home Depot or a Menards or kind of those main staples, a good grocery store, etc. You certainly aren't going to have like a walkable neighborhood, where you're walking out your door to a coffee shop. That's going to be exceedingly rare in a place like Blaine. It's not designed for that. It's very car heavy, but with a car, your access to things is going to be pretty solid. And even on the edges of Blaine, that 15-minute mark should be super, super doable. But I think maybe on the very northern edges, like as you're getting close to Ham Lake, maybe some of that convenience will suffer, but still not too bad, especially for kind of the very suburban lifestyle that it has here. Another undeniable pro is really nice outdoor spaces, really nice like city municipal park spaces like the athletic complex. There's also the soccer complex that is absolutely massive and probably about as good as a soccer complex gets in Minnesota at all. There's also, I think, a lot of development happening in Blaine, again, because there's a good bit of land. And I think the folks who are kind of working on designing Blaine and kind of continuing the progress within Blaine, I think they're pushing. And you're seeing a good bit of, updates about like, hey, this new thing is coming to Minnesota and it's going to Blaine. I don't know if it's true, but with some of that, it feels like people say, hey, Minnesota, who wants a blank, and who wants a soccer complex, for example, and Blaine goes, we'll take it, right? Because they're just like, it seems like there's just kind of this like push to make Blaine a little bit more interesting maybe, but I'm sure there's economic reasons and things like that involved as well. But in general, outdoor spaces, park spaces, even kind of the green spaces within the neighborhoods or neighborhoods like this where there's just some nice kind of foliage or like wooded areas. There's a good bit of that going on in Blaine. And then I think last pro I'll say is big houses, a lot of new infrastructure, things like gas stations and your Targets and things like that. Generally newer buildings and generally feels pretty nicely cared for. There's not too much of Blaine, although there are some things along kind of the Central Avenue corridor or Highway 65 corridor, and then kind of the southern tip of Blaine where some things can feel a little bit older, a little bit more tired, and just kind of like less pristine or shiny. And then there's just kind of some of those older parts where they just were kind of, businesses and like industrial areas that were kind of just put on Highway 65 because it was convenient, but now it's kind of baked into and Blaine surrounds that area, and it's still kind of industrial and just like not that aesthetically pleasing in my opinion. And another con I think is worth mentioning, before I said median sale price is $385. That's for all home types. So that includes townhomes, which is not usually what we're using. So apologies for that. But in general, the access to single family homes, for the most part, you're going to have to spend, median price or higher, which is $400K. And I would say the majority of the housing stock is probably $500, $600K or higher, right? 600 to $1 million is probably where most of the homes are selling right now. But if you wrap in townhomes and sort of the select few condos, that'll bring that median down, below 400K. I think another con is that you will get a decent bit of traffic, right? Because some of it is because you have both main highways, and some of that is because you have really good highway access to 35E and 35W, but there's kind of some main arteries that exist within Blaine that serve those highways, so that can be a little bit frustrating, and you'll also get a little bit of like that up north traffic, especially on a Friday, because my up north is the North Shore, is Duluth and further north, and so you have to take 35W and 35E to get there. Another con is just that the newness of Blaine, the newness of so many of these areas, it's going to be pretty cookie cutter. Even with some of these more, custom style homes, like kind of the neighborhood where I'm at, it still is pretty undeniably cookie cutter. There hasn't been enough time and there wasn't necessarily enough character like injected into these homes because they're built sort of post 1990. So because of the sort of spec home, the master plan development, you generally are just going to see it feeling a bit more cookie cutter and a bit less developed, right? You do have some of these lovely lots with some more mature trees and things like that. But generally speaking, it's going to be more of like a bit of a sapling, a 2, 3, 4-year-old tree in a front yard that's going to take a while to kind of grow to be anything close to a mature tree. I also think as the housing stock in Blaine continues to develop in areas like this and beyond, especially as you get closer to Ham Lake, like I mentioned, the infrastructure and the amenities are going to kind of lag behind, right? So there's going to be a while, I think, before some of the amenities toward the north of Blaine catch up to all of the development of the housing stock. But that said, as you drive around, it's obvious that they're working on it, right? Again, they're like, yeah, we got it. We're trying, we'll take it. And yeah. And so I think if you're okay with a little bit of a longer drive, a bit further south in Blaine or, a bit further east or something like that, I think eventually it will catch up and it will become a more convenient place to live. And then last thing, it's kind of on the same vein of things being cookie cutter, but I would say the amenities, the restaurants, etc., they're pretty suburban and they're generally pretty uninspiring. So cool. Based on all the B-roll you're seeing, that seems fair to say. All right, let's keep going. All right, y'all, right now I'm at Pioneer Park Trail, and you can see right behind me is 125th Avenue. Very easy parking, easy to get into, and won't take too long before you can't see the road anymore. Might still be able to hear it in the distance, but it's a nice trail. Oscar and I just enjoying, honestly, a lovely day making this video for y'all. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know what this is. If you're new to the channel, we have a section we like to call the For Fans Of section, which is to say, if you like what you see here, like if you're this far into the video and you're like, seems like a decent option for me or for us or whatever, right, for your relocation, then the reality is, for just about every single neighborhood or suburb in the metro, there are other comps that are similar and would have a similar quality of life overall. And since we specialize in helping people relocate and people who, generally don't know the area that well, we like to be able to put a few more places on your radar so then you have just more choices. And I generally think that that's the case with most people. When I'm looking for a house, when we bought a house in December of last year, when we bought a place, and it was our second place. And when we bought that, I was open to probably 12 neighborhoods in the cities and also some other suburbs as well. So the reality is, like, there's no one place that's the right place for somebody necessarily, unless there's really specific geographic reasons. But there's so many places that have a pretty good variety or consistency even of lifestyle. So that's what we're doing here. So before I get into that, just real quick, want to say that if you are moving to the Twin Cities and you're looking for help with the process, with the purchase of the home, with putting in roots here in the Twin Cities, we'd love to help you. And you can go to our website, tothetwincities.com. We have a contact form there that you can fill out in like 30 seconds. We'll get back in touch with you. We'll likely Zoom or meet up for coffee if you're here in person, something like that. And we'll dive in deep with you, and we'll really, hopefully, help to kind of narrow the focus and get you a really good idea of what you're doing and just really help you get the process started. And I think you'll feel, or actually you'll know, that you're in very good hands once you do that. So tothetwincities.com, contact form, easy peasy, and we'll get things going for you. So now, what are some spots that feel like Blaine? I think Blaine, because of its kind of newness, actually has some really good comps. And the interesting thing is that they're almost all like not right by Blaine. They are pretty much across the metro. But if you do want to be in kind of the north central suburbs, there are a few spots basically neighboring Blaine that would provide a pretty similar lifestyle. So Andover comes to mind, just to the west of Blaine. To the east of Blaine, you have Hugo and you have Centerville. Both of those places have pretty good options for new builds. Andover actually has some pretty affordable options. Hugo and Centerville have pretty similar price points to what we're seeing in Blaine. And some of why Andover's offerings are a bit more affordable is because Andover's a bit more developed, right? And if you want pre-existing stock, Andover has some really, really beautiful stuff there as well. And then interestingly, if you're looking for a new build, you don't care about proximity to the city like at all, but you kind of want something similar to Blaine. Ham Lake, just to the north, you actually get a lot of house for your money and kind of a lot of style and potentially larger lots or more interesting lots for a similar price point. And also, if you're looking for something that's maybe a bit more on the luxury end of things, Ham Lake actually has some really, really beautiful, more high-end kind of luxury style neighborhoods. So worth checking out. But then getting out of this north central suburb area, there to the east of the metro, you have Woodbury and Cottage Grove. Those are very similar places in my mind, where Woodbury is a bit more high-end. Cottage Grove is a little bit more kind of down the middle, just fastball suburb, if you will. But similar lifestyles to those overall. Again, on the east side of the metro, so really good access to St. Paul, not as good access to Minneapolis. And of course, very, very good schools in both of those. Woodbury in particular ranks really, really highly. In the southern metro, you have Lakeville. I think Lakeville is maybe the single best comp to Blaine that exists in the metro. And it's funny because it is purely the opposite end of the metro. Blaine is due north of both cities. Lakeville is due south of both cities. And basically both are where 35E and 35W reconnect to turn back into I-35. And kind of an interesting dynamic. I don't really think there's a good comp to the west. The closest things would be St. Michael and Albertville, but I think they feel much more like kind of small town turned suburb, whereas I think Blaine is just suburb, right? It doesn't really have any semblance of small town feel. It is just purely suburban. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of that out to the west, unless we're talking Plymouth, but Plymouth is like pretty high end. It's got Wayzata schools, which are like the top schools in the state. So again, they don't feel like perfect comps. Maybe worth considering if any of that sounds more up your alley, but again, I don't think they're perfect comps for Blaine, so I'm leaving them out. That's all I got for this video. See you in the next one. Bye.